Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How you all doing today? And today I have a wonderful, wonderful guest. His name is Mr. John David Miller, and he's an author of a very, I don't want to, interesting is like an understatement of of the events that unfold in the book that he wrote. It's called The Siebold Effect. And basically, part of it is that this was a series of, in other words, it's based on a true story. This is what happened to him. And it's like, it's so encompassing as a matter of fact, we were talking about it before we even started rolling, how sometimes things happen to you at certain moments in your life, and you really don't have any idea how significant they turn out to be till later on. And then when you look back, you realize that there's a pattern or kind of what they call predestination or manifold destiny that is woven in through the fabric of our lives. I think there's ultimately, we always have free choice, but you see, especially if you make the right choices, where it takes you. So how are you doing today, Dave?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here.
It's my pleasure, absolutely my pleasure. And I'm going to ask you what I ask all my guests. I mean, obviously, your book is about the supernatural and these events that transpired. But when was it that you had your first encounter with the paranormal or the supernatural? Was it as a child, as an adult? Did you know what it was when it happened?
Um, at the time that it happened, I knew something was special was going on, but and not until was writing the book did it all come clear to me what it meant. And it happened in my childhood.
Okay.
And to start off, both my grandparents on both sides, my mother's parents and my father's parents, lived across the street from each other in a little town called Greenville, West Virginia.
Okay.
And I used to spend every summer up there. And what I would surrounding Greenville was the Saltpeter Cave system, which is about a 5 mile cave system completely surrounding the little town. And I used to play in those caves every single day. And me and my brother would play. We'd play Army and flashlight war and hide and seek, and we'd do
Mm-hmm.
this in the caves. And one day I was going to a place that they called it the Devil's Writing Table,
Oh boy.
and it was a long tunnel, long round tunnel that you went down, and the further you went down, the smaller the tunnel got, and it came to a point where you had to crawl on your knees,
Oh my God.
and and of course this was fun for us at the time. It was
I was
it
gonna
was it
say,
wasn't
did your mother know what you were doing?
Yes, I'm not sure that they knew what we were doing, but we would go in one entrance of the cave system and come out another one a mile or two
Okay.
away. It was just an amazing place. And when I was crawling down this tunnel, at the end of the tunnel, or as what I could tell was the end of the tunnel, was a flat rock that crossed the center of the tunnel horizontal. So
Okay.
in my mind at the time, all I could picture in my mind was a circle with a horizontal line going down the center of it, and I knew that was really, really important. And as I look back on it, I think that was a paranormal moment for me.
Okay.
And I explained what this is in the book and what it meant, and it actually has a big part of what the book's all about.
Okay. So, in other words, these things were going on. You were a child, obviously, like you said, you're going in there, you're just having a good time. But still, there's a part in awareness of you, which I want to say is ageless inside of all human beings, where even then you recognized there was some significance. You didn't know exactly what it was,
Yes,
but
I had chill bumps going up and down my spine at the
okay.
time, which I noted, and in the future this would happen a number of times in my life,
Okay.
and I would recognize that as something supernatural going on.
Right. This was your
Like,
indicator that you were in the presence
and
of something like that. Okay.
I felt that something was trying to contact me, and I didn't know why or who or what.
Okay, so obviously you have very deep roots in this place that you grew up in from both sides of the family.
Yes.
So fast forward, you grew up And what happened? Did anything else happen while you were still a child or an adolescent?
Well, I felt the whole time, even as I was growing up, that I always had this presence around me. Something, I thought of it as maybe a guardian angel of some sort, because
Okay.
I had many, and I talk about this in the book, the many experiences where that guardian angel came in to kind of lift me out of a bad situation.
Okay.
And I know, and I talk about this in the book many times all through my life, and I ended up traveling extensively all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
and many times did this feeling come over me. I even when I was 16 years old, I was
Okay.
stabbed in Mexico.
Oh my God, what?
I know it's kind of hard to believe, but
No, no,
I
I mean, okay, well, see, it's it's not hard, it's hard to believe, but it's not hard to believe because it's talk about being at the wrong place at the wrong time, and we're gonna stop a minute. And you're gonna tell me what happened. What
okay, not a
your
problem.
guardian angel was
Um,
like, "Oh my God, he's really rounding me ragged."
yeah, I was visiting a friend of mine. His parents lived in Nogales, Arizona,
Okay,
and I grew up in Richmond, Virginia.
okay,
And so on first time I ever flew on a plane, and basically went out of the country was it was Cinco de Mayo,
oh boy, okay,
Mexican independence, I flew to Nogales, Arizona, and we were able to walk. It's Nogales, Arizona is a border town. The border goes right down the middle of the town.
mm-hmm.
One side's Mexico, one side's Arizona, and so we walked over to the Mexican side, and I was
Okay,
16 years old, and we got in a conversation with a young kid, and I didn't really know we. Of course, I wasn't very wise at the time, so we started following him as he was trying to show us around.
okay,
And as we were following him, he was starting to walk up some steps, and we followed him, and the steps were up the side of a cliff. And by the time we got up to the top of the cliff, we were surrounded by maybe 15 or 20 people,
oh my
and
God,
each one grabbed a belt loop around me and my friend Chuck. And it's not much you
oh,
can, not a lot you can do when
of
you're
course not. So basically, you guys were ambushed.
yes, we were on the cliff with people grabbing our belt loops, and they wanted to take our coats off, which I didn't. It was in Mexico. It gets very cold at night, so I
Okay,
kind of resisted them taking my coat off, and I thought the person in front of me hit me in the stomach. Didn't hurt one bit. I mean, I'm sure the
yeah,
adrenaline
the adrenaline at that point is
it was
like,
pumping, and so it didn't really hurt at all. And so I kind of shrugged it off.
mm-hmm.
And at that point, they got much friendlier. Didn't know
Okay,
why. Didn't they? I think they ended up us go, and they searched us, and but let us keep our wallets and our IDs, and we didn't have much money on us, so they
yeah,
didn't get anything out of it. And they finally let us go, and we walked down the cliff, and of course went back to his folks' house on the Arizona side, and went to bed. And of course, we didn't tell anybody what
I
happened.
bet it's like,
And I
yeah.
woke up in the morning, and there was blood all over the sheets, and I had a scar for a year. Apparently, they did stab me with something,
Oh,
so maybe
yeah,
that's
you were
why they.
just, yeah, the adrenaline. I've heard of that. People getting seriously injured, but right at that moment, they're not even
Yeah, it did.
aware.
Exactly, and it really didn't hurt that much the next day, and I didn't feel like going to the doctor, but I did have a scar for a year or so, and of course I wore that like a badge of courage to tell all my friends
You
about
know,
it.
that's a boy thing. That's a man thing.
Exactly. So I was kind of
All
proud.
right.
I was kind of proud of it at the moment, and but it
Yeah.
kind of solidified my love for adventure and travel. I mean,
Okay.
that started right that moment. But I felt the whole time that I had a guardian angel looking over me that day,
Okay.
and or not whatsoever. So, and I chalk it up to experience, and of course, it's in my book because it does have to do with the story.
But you know that's scary because let's face it, whether you felt it or not, somebody in that group intended to kill you. I hate to
That's right.
say it, but yeah.
Yeah, and when I reacted the way I did,
Uh-huh.
their demeanor changed completely.
It was like, "What's up? This guy's
What is that?
that's oh my, and
Exactly,
you know what? And I'm
exactly.
surprised though. You would have thought that your friend living there would have known better, but there
Yeah,
you go.
actually, he wasn't living there. His parents were,
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
or his father was. Excuse me.
His father.
But
Okay.
he lived in Richmond, Virginia, also.
Oh, okay. Now I understand. Because
So
I was
he was
thinking normally
experiencing
when you
the
live in a
adventure with
town,
me.
it's like, yeah, don't take any tour, don't use any of the tour guides.
I definitely drew a lesson from it and realized that you always have to be aware of your
Oh
surroundings at
yeah.
all times, and that was
Oh
a
yeah.
big lesson for me.
That's a very interesting but scary story. What an eye opener. That was a good life lesson. Thankfully, you lived through it. So,
Absolutely,
in a way, I
absolutely.
guess it then it prepared you for traveling around the world, right?
That's right. And in fact, it increased my desire to do that. And whenever I got a chance after that, I would go as the most obscure, faraway places as I absolutely could. And I started scuba diving.
Okay.
And so I went basically scuba dived around the world to the most obscure places you can imagine. I was on a Egyptian boat in the Red Sea the day the
Wow.
coal got bombed, right south of us. I was in the was it Sulawesi, Indonesia, a month after 9/11.
Oh my
So,
God.
but it just but it was all fun. Probably was the best time in the world to be in into the biggest Muslim country in the world is the month after
Well,
9/11.
I guess it's also one of those things that I mean, so many things developed after that, but it doesn't happen from one day to the next, if you know what I mean. It's
Absolutely.
something that just evolves within the few months, especially after 9/11. But and
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I was going through the international airport at Miami the week after the shoe bomber came about. Came
wow,
around.
that's good
So
timing. Very good.
yeah, I
Let
kept
me
on.
ask you
Yes,
something. Did you learn, which it sounds like you did, which was, I don't want to say, but it sounds almost like you learned how to melt in with the people there. In other words, you didn't want to have the big tourist, written
right.
across your forehead.
You didn't want to be the tourista,
Yeah, yeah. I hate to say it,
in
but
areas.
a lot of people don't realize that puts kind of a bullseye on you when you go traveling because a lot of the criminals, they look for tourists. They think, well, these people have money. Um, they're going to be scared. They don't know their way around, and chances are that even if we get caught, they will not come back to press charges
Yeah,
or go to court or anything. So
and I chalked it all up to experience
yeah.
and the thrill of adventure travel, and and so many I had many adventures. In fact, the story we're talking about today started while I was in on a liveaboard dive boat off the coast of Papua New Guinea,
Okay.
and that's when this story really got going.
And what happened?
Okay, I was scuba diving on this boat, and uh, back in Virginia, my girlfriend was going to veterinary school at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia,
Okay.
and we had a real estate agent looking for a house for her to live in instead of renting a place up there. Have her live in a place, own a
Okay.
place. Thought it was better deal. So we had a real estate agent looking for about a year for a place, and it's kind of hard to find a place up there. But while I was on this boat, I had got a satellite phone call from her, and she told me that the real estate agent had found a place up in Blacksburg, Virginia that day. It
Hmm.
went on the market, but there were already 3 offers on the property.
Wow.
Uh, and so sight unseen, I didn't know anything about it, but I figured, well, it's 3 offers on it, and it's right in my price range where I was looking for. Uh,
Hmm.
that it must be a good place. So I told her to offer $1,000 over the asking price of the
Okay.
property. I figured, with 3 offers on the property,
Yeah.
what's $1,000?
Yeah.
Uh, so I did that, and by the time I got back in the United States, I was the owner of this property.
Wow. So you bought this sight unseen. Talk about, and that's so interesting. You have been out already looking for a year.
Right, right, and no expectations of finding anything except when I
Wow.
was floating on this boat on the
Yeah.
Coral Sea in Papua New Guinea.
I imagine probably you were thinking, it's not gonna happen. Whatever. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, well,
Yeah.
go for it, but I think it was a gut feeling. Something
Mm-hmm.
told me to go for it,
Yes.
and I could hardly make the phone call because it was on a satellite phone, and you had like a 5 or 10 second delay. So it was a horrible conversation.
Yeah,
so
but
I'm
but
I'm
you
lu-
know,
I'm lucky I got it through. Yeah.
but that's
So
see,
so
and that goes along with what you're saying. How sometimes when things are meant to be.
exactly. And later on, I came to find out that this was meant to be, and it'll give you chills, chill bumps to hear how.
Okay.
I so I got this property, and after I bought it, uh, the first day I got there, it was the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my entire life. And I traveled all over the world, and it was a small little house sitting in the gap of the mountains, overlooking a creek and a dam.
Wow.
And later on, I found out that this house was built for the mill manager, and there once was a mill right over the side. It sounded like you walked up on the front porch, and the chill bumps again started up and down my spine when I walked up on the
Okay.
porch. It was the most beautiful view ever that you could possibly imagine, and the chill bumps were flying up and down, and it was just incredible spot. And it sounded like you were at the ocean, but you were on the front porch in the mountains because of the water going over the dam
Yeah, that's
right
right.
below. So it was just bizarre, and I didn't know what to expect when I walked to this property. My girlfriend had seen it once, but she
Oh,
never mentioned that she said, "Oh, I had a pretty good view," but it's an
okay.
astounding view.
Well, in a way
uh,
that's good though, because it
yeah,
kind of like,
exactly. So after I bought it, I got an insurance question from the insurance company saying, "Well, we can't insure your property because it sits in a floodplain." And I'm
okay,
saying, well, how does it sit in a floodplain when it sits up on the side of a mountain? How
okay.
could it be in a floodplain? And researching, I had to go find the plat of the property, and I realized at that point that the mailbox down at the end of the driveway was sitting down by the creek, and that was the part in the floodplain.
Oh, because they were basing it where the mailbox was at.
That's right. They didn't know. They was looking at the plat of the property. They couldn't tell it was on the side of a mountain. They just saw that the
Oh, I
floodplain
understand.
was right where my mailbox was standing.
Okay.
So, but that wasn't the part that made me go find a chair. It was on the plat of the property, on the bottom corner of the plat of the property, scribbled on the bottom of the corner of the plat of the property, which was Siebold.
Okay. And I know
Which
that's got
where
to mean something.
with the book's the Siebold effect. So,
Exactly.
so anyway, that after that, after I got over that, I knew something very special was going on with this piece of property, and it was almost like at that moment knew that I was brought to this piece of property for a reason.
Okay.
Didn't know what it was whatsoever, but I knew for a fact in my heart that I knew I was brought there by somebody for some reason. It was no accident. And after that, now also to go back, this property is only about 35 miles from Greenville, West Virginia, where I grew up.
Okay.
It sits in the same limestone belt that the caves that I played in were at.
Wow.
Now there's a lot of information about limestone being very spiritual, has a very
Yes.
spiritual essence to it
Yes.
because it once was living organisms.
Right.
Limestone, is shells and everything on the bottom of an ocean
Mm-hmm.
that eventually turned into a mountain.
Yeah.
So it's very, very spiritual things going on with limestone. And let's see, where was
Well,
I?
no, that you discovered you saw that the name Cybold on
Oh,
the.
right. And of course I knew Siebold was my mother's maiden name, and they were one of the grandparents were the Siebolds, and they lived across the street from the Millers in Greenville, West Virginia. So I knew
Okay.
something was going on, and I started doing research, and I found out that of the first 5 women now this property is only about 7 miles from Virginia Tech in Blacksburg,
Okay.
Virginia. I knew that I found out that of the first 5 women that graduated from Virginia Tech, 2 of them were related to me. One of them,
Wow.
there was a Carrie Seibold and a Lucy Lee Lancaster. Lucy Lee Lancaster became the librarian at Virginia Tech for the next 52 years.
Wow.
And her hobbies was travel and genealogy.
Imagine that.
This book is full of these things, which all at the time seemed like coincidences, but realized later on they were no
Yes.
coincidences at all. They were all connected. And her papers are now archived at the Virginia Tech Library, the Lucy Lee
That's
Lancaster
incredible.
collection. And there's 40 cubic feet of her papers. And I went through those 40 cubic
You did.
boxes of papers and found out that this property I just bought was connected to 3 of my first generation grandfathers.
What?
I know, that's how to write the book. Nobody believed me. So what happened was that these 3 grandfathers came over on the same boat, the Winter Galley, in 1738 from Germany, and they migrated down the 81 corridor down to the New River Valley and they started the German New River settlement. They were the founding fathers, and there were
Really?
three different families. They're friends. They were friends of each other, but through the 200 years later, my connection to them connected all three of them to be my grandfather.
Right, right. And I know what you're saying that, yeah, at that point they were, but then of course the family spread out, as everybody marries out. But that's incredible. You know what the odds on that are?
Well, that's right. That's why I knew at that point that it was no accident, because it couldn't be a statistical coincidence. It couldn't be.
And what happened?
The,
Did they own that land, or had they built that house, or was it just that they had owned that piece of land
okay,
and then later on it was built on?
this piece of land was picked out by John Michael. And let me tell you the names of these people. They were John Michael Price, John Philip Seibold, and John Philip Harless.
Okay.
And the Germans always named all their kids John, first name John, and went by their second names,
Okay.
because John was a sacred saint of the home.
Okay. I
Was
didn't know
Saint
that.
John? Was Saint John? So they named everybody John, and of course my name is John, John David
Yeah,
Miller.
they do. Yeah, and I know even among some Hispanic cultures, everybody in the family knows you and uses your middle name.
That's right. And I go by
Right.
I
And
go by
then,
Dave,
yeah,
my middle name. Right.
exactly.
Exactly. Um, so I'm thinking this is pretty astounding. But what happened? John Michael Price. Now there's a Price's Mountain there. There's a Price's Fork Road. That's all named after him.
Okay.
And he eventually built a stone fort and was attacked by Indian. There's a huge, incredible history behind this. But he picked out my property that I just bought as a mill site. And
Okay.
eventually his grandson, John David Price, built the mill.
Okay.
And in about 1880, my house was built for the mill manager to live in.
Yeah, because that was one of the things that a lot of these settlements eventually had were those mills.
That's right. And these were Germans, so they were excellent engineers, and they knew how to build. And this is the best mill site you have ever seen in your entire life. It's still the mill's no longer there, but the dam's still there, and it's incredibly built. It'll be there forever. But it
Wow.
was all German engineering, so he picked out the mill site, but he wasn't alive when the mill was actually built by his grandson.
Okay. Okay. So what happened then along the way? What, it got sold out to people and then you bought it, or?
Actually, it got eventually bought by Frank Seibold, a cousin,
Okay. Oh, wow.
and eventually it changed hands a few times. So when I bought it, the property was the last owners of the property was Frank Seibold, and that's why Seibold was written on the bottom corner of the plat of
Oh,
the
okay.
property.
And that's why I was thinking. I wonder, um, you know, when you were growing up, did you ever hear any conversation of any of the stuff that you found out later on, or was this just
Oh,
totally?
well, that's the funny thing. Greenville, West Virginia we used to play at the Cook's Mill, and had which was attacked by Indians every single day. But Cook's Mill was
Okay.
exactly like Price's Mill that once set on the property that I own. So it was very
Okay.
connected to Greenville, West Virginia in a number of different ways.
Okay. Okay. But like all families, when they spread out, and I imagine back then when they settled there, these communities are very, besides there's not as many people, they're very, like you said, here they are in the wilderness, they're facing Indians. They're basically trying to carve a settlement out of nowhere.
Right, and at that time, of course, when you grow up and your family gets the property, and
Right.
the younger siblings move on for other and get other land,
Exactly.
other
Right.
places.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened there too. But the sideball, actually, it ended up being a great grandfather of mine and a great great grandfather of mine
Yeah, because
grew
you
up,
you have it on maternal and paternal lines. Wow, that's incredible.
and the maternal lines are incredible because my grandparents' Seibolds were actually a cousins a generation apart. So I had a double dose of Seibold blood in my grandparents,
Wow, that's
which was
amazing.
unusual. And this place, the mill and everything is a place called Clover Hollow. And I have a great grandfather and a great great grandfather that came out of the Clover Hollow, and they moved up toward Greenville, West Virginia, and that's how my family in Greenville, West Virginia got started. But they all came from Clover Hollow.
I see. Exactly. Wow. So
So
here
at this
you
point,
moved in and you discovered that name, like you said, on the records of the property.
property,
And
right?
then what
Then I
happened
found out
after
about
that?
then I studied about the New River for about 10 years. I studied the history of this place
Okay.
and all about the German New River settlement, the colony that they created in this area. They first started off the horseshoe bends of the New River, which is about 7 miles away from this property, and so. Let's see, where was
Well, let
I?
me ask you something. Once you moved
Okay,
in there, okay, it sounds
okay.
like what, that house was what, like 100 years old, more or less?
Yeah, probably 120 or 30 years, right?
Okay.
Exactly.
And
But
I'm
it
going
had
to ask you
it had
this.
been redone a few times. They added on a bedroom and a bathroom and put electricity in there and put a
Right.
wraparound porch and a tin roof. Just absolutely beautiful.
Now, and the reason I was going to ask you is that I was going to ask you, did you do any renovations? Because I know a lot of people, when they go into these older homes and they start renovations, that sometimes things start happening in the house, and I was wondering if that happened with you.
Well, that's exactly what happened. I studied the history, and I actually didn't live in this house. I went to school. She never experienced any supernatural activity whatsoever while she was there.
It was all you?
Uh, but I studied for about 10 years. The history of this place is absolutely incredible. It's connected to George Washington, the French and Indian War, the Draper's Meadow Massacre, which happened on Virginia Tech property. A book was written about that called "Follow the River." It was
Okay.
about Mary Ingalls being captured by the Indians and
Mm-hmm.
taken to Ohio, and she escaped and made her way. She followed the river back, the New River, all the way back to her homestead and escaped.
This is
But
Mary Ingalls of Little House on the Prairie, right? Is that who we're
well, it's not.
talking?
Oh, it's Mary Ingalls, but it's of the Draper's Meadow.
Okay, for a minute there, I was like, what?
It might be the same name. I don't know. But anyway, so a book's been written about that, and that was incredible. But the day of the massacre, James Patton was murdered that day. He was the head of the militia in Virginia, and his nephew, William Preston, whose son later on became a governor of Virginia and everything. But he was sent out on an errand that morning.
Okay.
But while he was gone, the 20 Shawnee Indians attacked and killed or kidnapped everybody there that day. And they lay left with Mary Ingalls and 3 other people, and a lot of things they stole. But they traveled directly over my property that day, because my property sits in the gap of the mountains. The
Okay.
only way you can travel east or west in that area, you would have to travel over my property.
Why? Because of
And
the
even
mountains, or
it's right. It's a water gap right in the mountains.
okay,
And
okay,
either you have to climb over the mountain or you go through this pass, which
yeah,
is where my property is.
okay.
And even William Preston that day went over my property, but he didn't run into the Indians. And
I was
the
gonna
Indians,
say they probably the natives were using that area even before there were settlers there. Then.
there's a Paleo Indian site right around the corner from
Ah,
where
there
my
you go.
property. So it's all connected to the Indians, and I knew that there were Indian trails everywhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
And this comes later on in the story of the Indian trails. Uh, this story is so phenomenal. It's very it's never been anything written or like this ever that I can find.
Okay.
So anyway, I studied the history for about 10 years and all about the Draper's Meadow Massacre, and I connected to my property, and I even mapped out all the Indian trails in the area because I knew an Indian trail went by my property somewhere. It had to, but it was through the development and everything, and through the building of the mill and the roads, and they must have disappeared. But I studied and mapped out all the trail systems, and these trail systems were connected from this property through the property I grew up in Greenville, West Virginia. There's Indian Creek up there, all kinds of the same trail system was where I was. So I knew
Okay.
that was there. So I studied this history was just absolutely incredible. But I took the property. Actually, the girlfriend's gone, but I still had the property, of course.
Okay.
And I started a remodeling project on the property because it was older piece of property. It needed to be remodeled, and new
Mm-hmm.
flooring, new floors, and stuff like that. So I started doing that, and
Okay.
that is when the supernatural activity started up,
There we go.
which I filmed and photographed every bit of it as it happened.
Did.
Yes, because I knew something was going on, and I'm a photographer from way back, so I photographed everything and filmed everything. And the first experience in the book called The Seventh Step. And as I was remodeling the stairway in the house, it was covered in 2 layers of carpeting, 3 or 4
Oh
layers of
wow.
paint. But I knew I could see the grain of the wood through the paint after I took all the carpeting off, and I
Okay.
could see the grain. So I knew there was nice wood under there.
Mm-hmm.
And I later on found out it was like 300-year-old white oak steps underneath.
Wow.
So but I had to hand scrape each step.
That's a
Uh,
lot of work.
Oh, it took me all weekend just to do one stairway,
I
one
believe it.
step. So I started out with step number 1. It was 12 steps altogether, and when I
Okay.
got to step number 7, all of a sudden the chill bumps up and down my spine wouldn't stop.
Really?
Couldn't stop it whatsoever. So I stepped off the step, and they would go away. I could step above the step and it would go away.
It was
But every
that
time
step.
it was that one step on the number 7, and later on, I came to find out the number 7 has a very strong meaning in this book.
Okay.
So I know I'm on the 7th step. I know I can recreate this feeling anytime I want to. Anytime I go and stand on that step, the chill bumps come, and I could repeat it anytime I wanted to. So this got me to think, well, this place is haunted. Something's going on here. So
Well,
I started.
you know what? Because I was thinking, depending on what, either because of, something paranormal, going on there, or
Yes.
also the number 7, like you said, in and of itself, it's got its own mystical significance. So,
Huge significance, and I explain exactly what the number 7 means in the book and what importance it has. But at the time, I just noted in my head that it was the 7th step. It didn't go any further than that at the time.
Okay.
But what it did is made me interested in if this place is haunted or ghost or something. But it didn't feel like a haunting.
okay.
It was a very uplifting thing. It was very exciting. It was very exhilarating. It wasn't scary at all.
Okay.
So that's what kind of threw me off a little bit. So I went and studied I started watching all the ghost shows. And
You're like, I can't.
I got to figure out how to investigate this. So I went out and bought an infrared camera.
Okay.
And actually the first thing I did was I did an I taped an EVP with my iPhone, and
It works.
got it, when I was walking up the steps, I was talking to the EVP, and I wasn't getting anything. When I got to the seventh step, I could see the needles go crazy on my
Oh God.
on the meter.
That's
So when I went back and listened to it, it wasn't a voice of any time. It was more like an electronic squelch.
okay.
Uh, and so my thinking was at the time, well, it's not. It's electronic squelch. It's like something is trying to get my attention.
Right. It's an
Uh,
anomaly of some type.
yeah, something on purpose being
Mm-hmm.
done to get my attention. So that's when I went out and bought the $80 Panasonic infrared camera
Okay.
and filmed the steps at night.
Okay.
And I would pass the camera over the steps, and when I brought the camera back down, panning over the step number 7, I would lose 2 frames.
All the
And I did
time?
this 3 times. Did it
Really?
3 times. I could tell I was losing something. When I went back and examined the film, I could
Right.
tell I was losing 2 frames. But it was weird. Just right over step number 7, it was losing 2 frames. And after that third time, I
Yeah.
panned back up, and I could see a little what I call ectoplasm
Okay.
jump off it kind of morphed and jumped off the step right at the spot that I was getting the EVP.
What?
And when I went back and looked at the film, I had to go back and look frame by frame, and it was
Mm-hmm.
only in 3 frames that I could see it. I could see this little ectoplasm, little ball, and then the next frame it stretched out, and the next frame it jumped. You could see it jump off the step. And,
Let me
and
ask
so
you something. Did you? And
okay.
now I'm like, did you ever pull the step up just to see there was something underneath there?
Well,
Or I don't
I
know. I don't know
definitely
if the
thought
stairs could do that or not.
I decided at the end. I did think about that, but I decided not to do that. I was thinking at the time that maybe the mill manager hid his gold there, or something, and it
Well,
was
yeah.
just not. I didn't know. I was just
I
my
would have thought. I
imagination
would
was
have
going
probably
crazy.
thought something along those lines, like,
Right. Exactly. I got this on film, so it only appeared in 3 frames. This
okay,
jumping off. So it happened very quickly. Now, once you know it happened, you can see it on the film.
all right,
But that means if it happened in 3 frames, it's 30 frames per second. That means it took 1/10 of a second for this thing to jump off that step. So it was phenomenally quick. In fact, I thought of that as a supernatural speed,
yeah,
because it wasn't like it was a normal thing happening. It was, but it was still, it was coming back to me that something was trying to get my attention, and don't know why and everything. But I think it doesn't feel like a haunting. It's not scary at all. It's real exciting, and it just I didn't know what it was, and I continued filming. I started filming around on my website. I got the best orb videos you've ever seen in your life.
wow.
Orbs flying around with trails on them, look like little meteors,
Let me ask you,
comets.
would this happen when you were in the house, or when you were gone, or was it when you were asleep? When was it that all this phenomena was going on?
It only happened when I was trying to film it.
Really?
That's what told me that it was still something trying. It was very weird, because it was like it was giving me what I expected to see.
Okay.
This sounds kind of weird, but it was like it was when I was filming and what was going on in my head.
Okay.
When I was watching all these shows, I was seeing a lot of orbs.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went out to try to film something, I got orbs,
Okay.
and that changed. That changed later on all different types of shapes and sizes of every shape you can imagine, morphing shapes and everything. Never any apparitions at all, which again told me that this wasn't a haunting.
Let me ask you something though, Dave, real quick.
Okay.
Did you, when you were traveling in all these places, whether it was here in the U.S. or internationally, did you ever have a
Sure.
paranormal experience or something, or witness anything, or was this something that just started happening to you when you were there on that property?
I always had these premonitions.
Okay.
I learned really young to trust. So I don't know if you call them paranormal experiences, but I always had my whole life premonitions. I mean, not
Okay.
premonitions. That's kind of a bad word. More like just I would notice things out of the ordinary,
Okay.
and I thought they were directed at me. Kind of
Okay.
weird, but that's what I thought. So I wasn't. It wasn't freaking me out when this stuff was happening because it was like it was being it was directed at me. It wasn't something that I came across.
Okay.
It was something that was happening because I was there.
I
It was
understand what you mean.
kind of weird. It was just a very
No.
surreal type of feeling.
Well, no,
uh,
it's almost like the feeling that you get is what's happening at that moment is happening for you to witness it.
that's right, and it's also manifesting itself in a way that for me to notice.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody ever saw any of this stuff ever, and
Right.
the only reason I can say it happened because I filmed it,
Well,
so I know it happened. But I don't think it would have happened to anybody else at all because they weren't the target. I was targeted to come there, and I knew at the time that I still was thinking that well, this place might be haunted, but it didn't. This did not feel like a haunting.
right, like your prototypical that people description. So
Right.
as the time went by, I guess were they afraid of like overwhelming you? Did it slowly ramp up?
It at the I think for about a year. Now all this was done by myself. You know, there really wasn't anybody else involved.
Uh-huh.
It was right when I had broken up with my girlfriend and everything like this, and so I kind of put all my efforts into this house in the mountains because I knew something was special about it. So I experienced all this on my own, but then again, I did film everything, so it's not like I'm crazy.
Right.
Um, but I would start filming. I could every time I would pick the camera up and go try to film something, I would capture something on film for about a year
Wow.
every time, and I would start filming stuff in other parts of the house, and then that brought me out to the front porch.
Okay.
And the front porch has an iron railing around it. And I started getting the EMF. It would register about 10 times when I got to the center post on the railing.
Oh.
Now, later on, I kind of figured out this was a man-made, basically. What it was, this iron railing was bolted into limestone concrete, was
Okay.
laying on limestone bedrock, and I
Okay.
believe it was producing energy of some sort, and that's what was making the EMF meter go
Go
crazy.
crazy.
But it would go crazy all around the railing. And I could use divining rods. They would cross every time I go over the railings. There was no electrical outlets anywhere around, and
So
so
it
it's
was
no
strictly what
electric.
was coming off of that. And how about dreams? Did you ever start having any type of dreams?
Uh,
I mean, I know people dream. Don't, that's I guess that's the wrong
yeah, no,
question.
no, no.
Dreams that you
Many,
yourself
many,
were like,
yeah, I learned later on that dreams were very important, and I would try to remember what they were and try to make some
hmm
sense out of them. But it would almost seem like my reality was my dream,
okay.
um, if that makes sense.
Well, no, no, no. I understand, and sometimes I know that, um, especially when people are having this type of experience, as much as let's say it sounds like you had a really open mind and you were like, in other words, there was no fear there. You know,
Exactly. Yeah, that was
sometimes our
yeah,
critical
exact.
factor when it goes down is when we go into the dream state, which is a lot of times when you get these messages, and sometimes they come through as like really weird dreams, or when you dream with people that you're like, "Who's this?" And then later on, you realize that it's part of what you were experiencing when you're awake.
Exactly. Well, this whole story has sacred geometry built all into it.
Mm.
It's got numerology. It's got signs and symbols throughout the whole book that all eventually I come to figure out what they meant. And so I was intrigued with all this stuff the whole time, and I was on a high state of alert.
Okay.
Amazing, amazing. I was looking. I would notice everything that was going on because I knew that if that's something was going on
Okay.
It brought me outside and I started filming. Now, it gets even crazier. This house overlooks the creek down below.
Okay.
And every time there was a weather event, let's say snow or rain, the water would start to bubble up like a witch's cauldron.
Really?
Yeah, and later on I've come to the conclusion this is a very energetic spot. There's a lot of springs that go through the limestone that end up in the creek. So I think this is more of a chemical reaction between the acid rain and limestone and all the chemicals in the water. So anyway, but I started, this seemed important because it seemed like this was an energy source for all these manifestations were happening because they were feeding off this energy in this place to be able to manifest themselves. So I started filming outside every time after a weather event.
Okay.
And I started filming the creek while it was bubbling up. I would set my camera on a video camera on a tripod and film the creek also. And I captured things on film swimming through the water that I can't identify.
Oh.
And
like the size of what, of a fish, of a person, what?
A size of a fish, but not a fish.
Oh, wait, no. You gotta tell me. I'm like, it's like they got him sitting down. Like a fish, but not a fish. I mean, I imagine it went through the water like a fish. Right.
But it moved at a supernatural speed, just like the thing off the steps. In fact, I filmed one thing flying through the frame of the camera that I come to the conclusion later that it's an undine. Do you know what they are?
Yes, I do know what that is.
Okay, that's my conclusion that this is
that's an elemental spirit.
That's right. And a lot of this stuff I was filming, I come to the conclusion there were elementals. And in fact, the whole book is about the nature-spirit relationship. And this is the way they were contacting me, was basically the nature spirits were contacting me for some reason. And
that is incredible. So what you're
telling
me is that what's there predates your family even being there.
It's I don't think you know the crazy part of the story. It gets much crazier.
Okay.
So I'm filming this stuff, and I film it in the water, and it looks like a plant, like a flower, swimming through the water. And it's going against the current, and it's going at this high rate of speed, but I was able to capture it in three frames, just like the thing off the steps. So it tells me it's moving at the same speed that ectoplasm was moving off the steps. And the water is bubbling up as this is happening, and this thing flies across my screen, I think on purpose. It was meant to be seen by me.
Wow.
And it's the most bizarre thing. I think I got the video on my website. But anyway,
let me tell you something. That's like.
Well, I filmed this. I took high resolution photographs of the snow one day because it looked the snow looked like lakes. So I photographed it, and then when I looked at the film, I was just amazed. I got little figures in the snow. One looked like Pegasus. One looked like it had wings. And at that time, I was starting to develop the theory of that these were elementals. You got fire, you got air, you got
right, exactly.
and I was getting representations of all of them. I got the undines, I got fire, I got wind and air. But I caught it on film. So I know something's still trying to contact me. But what are they trying to show me?
Really?
And that's when it gets even crazier.
Okay. I'm buckled in. Let's go.
Okay. All right. You asked for it.
Yeah.
You'll see now why I had to write the book and had documented it. And I documented all this just because of this, because it just sounds weird. Sounds unbelievable.
No, it's like, wow.
So one day in the morning, I'm very keen now to everything that's going on, everything that's around me. So I'm drinking coffee one morning. rode very lightly. I was looking out over the yard, and I saw, because of the white snow and the brown leaves, I could see the outline of a trail going right over my property. And I knew at that moment that that was probably the only Indian trail left in this area, but it goes right across my yard.
Okay.
So I went out to look at this. Now, this is when it gets crazy, and this is where it's hard to believe, but I filmed it all. I even filmed the discovery of this trail.
Okay.
And had that in the books, step by step. This is what I saw. This is what So I went out to investigate this trail and I knew there's Indian trails around here somewhere, and I knew at that moment that this was a trail.
Okay.
And I went out to the end of the trail where it was, where when they built the mill, they cut in a road. Okay. So they kind of cut off a piece of the side of the mountain, and that's where the trail ends. It was about a 15-foot drop down to the road.
Okay.
But there was a strange rock.
Okay.
And so it was covered in moss and all this kind of stuff.
Where was
but it was
this
a very,
rock? At the end of the trail?
At the end of the trail where it dropped off to the road, where the trail ended, where they built the road.
Okay.
But so to me, I'm thinking it's a trail marker because looks like it's got carvings all over it. It's a trail marker. Maybe it was, at one time they made this a trail marker for whatever.
Right.
So I filmed that, and then I took a lot of the moss off the trail, off the rock, and it was the most obscure carvings I've ever seen anywhere in my entire life.
Really?
And I've been to ancient civilizations all over the world, and I've never seen anything like this. But it was obviously ancient and almost alien in looking.
and it wasn't visible before because it was covered up by the moss?
It's one spot where probably nobody's even stood for 200 years. It was completely cut off from civilization when they built the mill and the road in.
Right, and nobody would bother to go there anymore because the trail
nobody
was
would
not
ever.
in use.
And even the house I'm in, you would never go to that spot
Wow.
ever. But so I did that day, and of course I photographed it all as I discovered it, and then I started photographing all the rocks around me, which is the whole mountain is covered in these rock formations, and. This is the crazy part. I'm now convinced, and I've got hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of photographs of the most obscure petroglyphs you've ever seen in your entire life.
Are you kidding me?
No, I've written 3 articles now for Ancient Origins magazine, or ancientorigins.net, and they think, as well as I do, that I have discovered an ancient civilization on this property. I told you it's just crazy.
No, I'm just quiet because I'm like, oh my God.
This is why nobody believes me, because it's too far-fetched. But
because I'm thinking, wait a minute. Native Americans, unfortunately, that was part of the thing was that they didn't have written language. Everything was oral tradition.
That's
so
right.
I'm thinking, does this predate how far back?
This predates the North American East Coast Native Americans. This is probably their ancestors, or not. It gets even crazier where I've even read mythological folklore. By the way, this also house sits on the sacred hunting grounds. So by studying Cherokee folklore is what gave me all the answers to what's going on at this
Okay, so the
place.
Cherokee were the Native Americans that would normally were there at one point.
Yeah, they wouldn't have. They didn't live there. They actually used those as their sacred hunting grounds.
Okay.
And they shared them with all the Indian tribes. But this was what these petroglyphs. I've documented all this. They're on my website. They're the most incredible. In fact, I've even matched some of these petroglyphs up to Machu Picchu in Peru.
What?
I know,
well, I was
going to
ask you, when you say petroglyphs, are they, how some of these petroglyphs, you could tell that they're an animal or that they are symbolic of, that you could tell what it is?
Yes, these aren't like cave drawings. These are like rock formations that are shaped into anthropomorphic shapes.
Really?
Yeah, most unbelievable
Wow.
things you've ever seen in your entire life, and I've got thousands of
Oh my
and
God.
around all these petroglyphs, I or stuck in the nook and crannies, portable petroglyphs and carvings, and
Oh my
I've got
God.
hundred portable pieces right now that are unbelievable.
Really?
Now, of course, nobody believes me. I've had the state archaeologist out there, and he was amazed. But there are no experts on this anywhere.
I can
Uh, if you go
imagine.
to if you go to Indian experts, all they know is pipes and
Pottery.
pottery and arrowheads and that sort of thing.
Right.
This goes back way further than that, and it's the most creative rock carvings you've ever seen. And I've even got rock carvings which
Well,
carved
and
on the
if you're
rocks.
telling me that they took the trouble and they carved things that were portable, that means that it was like, I want maybe the protection or the mystical meaning
Yeah,
of
it told me
this to
that
go.
this is a very sacred spot. It put a connotation into it that these carvings were done. Uh, these carvings are absolutely amazing, and I strongly feel that these are probably alien origin,
Really?
or possibly an alien colony
Or
was once there.
influence, you think?
Or influence, exactly. And I think it's I write about in the book. It's called iconoclastic behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Is where a civilization goes in, and then another civilization comes in and builds on top of it,
Right.
and then another civilization like Peru,
Yes.
Uh, so so I'm thinking this ancient colony was there. Then the American Indian were there,
Right.
and then my ancestors came and built their colony on top of that
Right. Yes,
colony
exactly.
without noting it. So that now gives me the reason I was brought to this piece of property to discover this ancient civilization, which is trying to tell us lots of things. And it's
Well, you know
it's
what?
actually so incredible.
It's
It's hard to talk about.
incredible, Dave, because the truth is that every day they're discovering, originally, the thought was that the Native Americans had come over from through Alaska through the land bridge and then gone through
Right.
South Central
Yeah, I talk
America.
about that in the book. You got the Clovis points and all that. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
But they're always discovering after, this was discovered or and it's set in stone, but then they discover all these different things, like even like what they've done with the discovery of America. Poor Christopher, he's out of it. They found all these settlements, from the
Well,
Vikings, from other people that got here
uh,
way before Columbus.
exactly. In the 1990s, they discovered a place called Cactus Hill here in Virginia, not too far away from Richmond, and they dated 1,000 years. So that's
What year
10,000
did
years,
they dated that to when?
25,000 years ago, which is
What?
10,000 years later than the Clovis Indians, who they thought that's where the original ones came from, the Alaskan land bridge.
Right, exactly.
Now, the
God,
thing is about my
I had not
property.
heard of that. I had not heard of Cactus Hill. I had never
Yeah,
heard of that.
I don't know why people don't talk about it, but in my research, I found out about that. Now, this house, you also got to remember where this property is. If you would have thought about the original humans, I talk about this in the book, the original humans to come crossed over my property, either
Uh-huh.
going east or west.
Right.
So, but I'm thinking these rock petroglyphs are still, and the only reason I was able to identify these things was taking high resolution photographs of them and studying them for hours. Because if you were sitting right in front of them, you would never notice a thing. But if you capture these rocks at a certain angle, you could definitely see exactly what's going on. And my website's got a lot of these things on it. I got an Instagram account now.
Let me ask you something. Do you think that piece of land, I don't want to say that it was a place people would come to get in touch. I don't want to. I don't want to say temple because it predates that. But in other words, the people that were there felt what was there and would come there to.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yes, I definitely think this was a special spot,
Right.
and it probably continued on through the different generations of inhabitants of the area. Probably knew it, except for my ancestors who came in from Germany They
Right.
obviously didn't know what was there and built, but they picked this spot out because it's such a strategic spot
Yes, and you know
that they
what? I
picked
was
it up
gonna
for their mill
say
site.
that it's not the first time that certain things are built in certain places, but then when you look, it's like there's no way, like you said, your family would have known, but certain locations are picked over and over again
That's right, and for a reason.
for a
And
reason. Yeah.
this was a very strategic spot, perfect place for a mill. And one day that the water was way low, and I went to the bottom of the dam, and I found this most incredible rock carving I've ever seen. It's a little portable piece, but it's perfectly carved. It's the one piece you can definitely tell was carved because it looks like a head of a fish on there and all this. And it was sitting on top of a rock that was normally underwater, and it
Okay.
was like it's sitting there for me to find. And
Wow.
that's what put it all together for me that this was the ancient civilization was here, and then beings came through, and then my ancestors came through, and then the modern world came through. And it's all built on the same spot, and
Hmm.
none of this would ever have been found if I hadn't been brought to this piece of property.
Let me ask something, Dave. And I know sometimes people don't record that. Did you come across any of your family papers where anybody that ever lived there ever said or wrote anything about it, any experience they had when they
No,
were there?
no, no. Now, lots of times in Greenville, West Virginia, my grandfather would tell me stories about the Indians and about how the fort was attacked every day at one
Hmm.
time, and on Indian stories like that, which
Right.
got me as excited as a little kid about that sort of thing. And when I first started before the supernatural activity started up, I thought something was going on in that area, obviously. So I started searching the creeks and everything. I was looking for Indian artifacts, is what I was
Okay.
looking for, but I never found any, and I never found any tools or anything around all these petroglyphs I found,
Isn't
which
that weird?
which tells me that this was a sacred spot.
Right. In
It
other
wasn't.
words, you never found something you could say, okay, this exactly. And I understand what you're saying. Well, I didn't find, like you said, arrowheads. I didn't find pottery. I didn't find anything that I could say, okay, I know that this was from, let's say, the Native Americans that used to live here, whether it was a Cherokee or whatever, and I know this predates that. Just you're telling me there's an absence
Of
of
all
that
that,
type of.
which tells me two things. Number one, that this place is extremely old, and I go through that in the book. People can't understand. You go to Peru now. People don't understand the Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest mountains, and the new river up there is the second oldest river in the world. But you go to Peru where the mountains are they're only 25, 50 million years old, but you find all kinds of civilizations there, ancient civilizations.
Okay.
What tells me that these in the Appalachian Mountains are so old that they basically disappeared over time. They turned to
Right.
dust
They're worn down.
over time. But this one place is protected. And it was all covered with moss, covered with brush. You would never know anything was there until I found it. So I dug it out, and I think there's a sacred temple there, which I found.
What?
The photographs are incredible, but it's very hard to show anybody tell the story because it's too unbelievable. But I documented it, and as I discovered all these things, I filmed it as it was happening.
Okay.
So it's definitely there. And the rock petroglyphs they're they're phenomenal.
And that's wow. So, I mean,
And
especially when you told me that you saw something in the water going against the current, I'd be like, oh my God, what?
uh, and it looks like I've come up with theories on exactly who this is, what this is, and it all goes back to nature spirit relationship. And if you think about it, if an ancient civilization was there once,
Mm-hmm.
and you believe that there's an afterlife, see, I think
Right.
this whole book proves more than anything that there is an afterlife.
Okay.
Because you can think about this two ways. Either everything that I told you tonight was it had to be all coincidences, just random events that happened. But if it
Okay.
wasn't random events,
That would be
then it means that somebody brought me to this piece of
sure.
property. And
Absolutely.
that is basically the essence of an afterlife. Somebody from the afterlife, which I think was my ancestral spirits
Well,
brought
absolutely.
me
Yeah.
there because, and if you think about it, an afterlife, if there is an afterlife, then that ancient civilization, that's where they are now.
Well,
That they're
and
they're the
there's
same
such a thing
spot.
as familial collective memory also, which
I talk about that a little bit in the book too.
you do.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. But my ancestors, if they went to a heaven or whatever you believe in, it's the same heaven that those ancient civilization went. So they're
Right.
all
Yeah.
together now in this afterworld,
Let me
and
ask
they
you,
can.
do you think that for some reason there's either, I don't want to say a rip because that's inaccurate, but
I think
where
this
the
your portal. You
dimensions
mean?
cross over very.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think the energy this natural energy that's happening at this spot is producing the energy that connects the afterworld to our physical world. It's a portal. It's the connection between us and the afterlife.
Wow.
And they can take advantage of this because there's so much energy there. They can use that to cross. That's how people in the afterworld connect to the people in the reality
Okay.
through nature.
Right.
Through nature is nothing more than a physical expression of what's in the afterlife. And all the Cherokee Indians, they all believe their ancestors are part of the natural world.
Right. But
They all believe that the rock formations contain the spirits of their ancestors.
but you know what? It also kind of makes it easy to understand why they thought of this location as being special.
Oh, absolutely. There's no. In fact, the same thing when first day I walked onto that piece of property, I knew it was very special. And I traveled all over the world, and I've seen some really special places. This was definitely special. I knew it at the time.
Right. I mean, they didn't have, let's say, your the cameras and all the things that you use to capture all this evidence, but they kind of, they trusted their, like what you got, the goosebumps. They trusted their bodies, or if they had any type of, people that were, mystics or seers that knew that there was something about this location.
Absolutely. In fact, that the chill bumps, I'm convinced, were the connection between me and the afterlife. That was their connection. That's the way they could contact, just like they could affect my camera. They could put or the EVP. They could put the squelch on there, or they could manifest themselves. I was taking photographs. Just 2 days ago, I was up there, and I was filming the creek. First time I've ever seen the creek frozen over.
Okay.
And I photographed right in front of me. And I went back and looked at the photographs yesterday and was astounded. I could see images of faces looking at me through the ice. Looked like they were underwater, but they were all
God.
They were all smiling.
Okay,
and they were
that's
all
good.
Now I put this picture on my website last night. It's on the first page of my website, thesybaldeffect.com, and the first page is all about the Appalachian supernatural. It's got videos on there. The second page is called the Lost Tribe of Clover Hollow. That's all a lot of the petroglyphs are on there, but there's many, many more. And the third page is about the book itself.
And you know what? I am like,
I know that's why it's very hard to tell people this story, because it's just so phenomenal.
Well, it's not even that it's phenomenal. It's that, you hear these places like in different parts of the world.
Right.
But they're usually have got either temples or churches or something as big is already there.
That's right. And so does this place, now that I think.
Oh,
I think it's got definitely a temple location, which I've identified, and it's got rock guardians that guard over it.
You do.
It's just amazing.
What kind of rock, what are we talking here? Like, was it something, are they at certain locations, or these guardians?
I'm right in the crevice, like a water gap in the mountains. Both sides of the mountains, on both sides of the creek, are carved. Every rock you can find is carved. Every little rock you can find is carved. And a lot of these small carvings were all buried around the base around these, and I've just started. I've really just investigated the petroglyphs right on my property, right out on the yard of my house.
Right.
I can photograph the ones across the creek, but it's obvious nobody's ever. You can't. It's very steep, and nobody has been over there
Okay.
since these were created, probably. But in the wintertime, when all the leaves are gone, you can photograph all these rocks.
Right, because there's
'Cause you can't even see them in the summertime.
Wow.
So it's a crazy story.
Well, because I'm thinking to myself, because that was what I asked you. Have you ever gone, like, in other words, found out if it's how far out this extends?
I think it extends pretty far.
Okay.
In
Okay.
fact, I've got but you would never know it because you never notice it looking for it. You look like just normal rock formations to you unless you know what to look for. Once you see what's going on, you can see it in all the rocks.
Okay.
And it's hard to explain. You'll need to go on my website and look at them.
Well, no,
'Cause
you know what?
it's
And I'm
incredible.
sure, like, what you're describing, when you've trained your eye to look for certain things, after a while, it becomes easier and more apparent for you, for example.
Yeah, I see it in all the rocks now. I see exactly what's going on. It's all about the faces, basically. They carved one rock would have 25 different faces on it, and it would have different images. There were really images within images, and it only from and different images from different angles. So the only way you would ever see it would be looking at high resolution photographs that captured that moment that you can actually recognize what's going on.
That is because you know
So
what?
that's why
I've
that's
heard
why
of
my that's why
spirits, and it's
that's
like what you're saying, faces sometimes manifesting from people that have passed on. Like, I've heard of that in different ways and stones, but that's incredible.
exact. Yeah, and I think that the use of these faces was done on purpose. Let's say you're an alien
Uh-huh.
colony, and you
Okay.
wanted to communicate your existence to the future. You couldn't really carve your language into a rock. Who would know your language? But you
Exactly.
can carve faces, and you can carve anthropomorphic figures.
Yes.
People of anywhere would recognize what these are. So
Exactly.
it's all one big communication event.
And you know what? You're gonna laugh and you're gonna go, well, Marlene, your way. You know what this reminds me of? Okay, you remember that movie, Close Encounters,
Sure.
where basically they end up communicating with the extraterrestrials via music because there's no. This was their how they were hoping on the most basic level to communicate.
That's right. The harmonic tones is
Right,
the
with
way that they
harmonic
were able to
tones, because,
communicate.
like you said, language that was out of the question. And this
I've even
was
yeah, I've even got rocks with carvings on there that looks like a language, looks like a
right.
carved
Well, and I'm thinking to
language.
myself, well, you know what? And what you just said, where if you've got two cultures, or however you want to look at it, trying to communicate, sometimes you have to start with the basics, which are symbols.
That's right. Exactly. And I talk about that in the book about the language of Clover Hollow. And if you look at some of these rocks, it looks like a language. You look closely, you see its little faces. It's
Ah,
faces with different expressions all over the place. So what a great way to communicate for the
yeah,
ages
yes. And it makes you think
forever.
that we're the dumber ones, because this almost sounds like what you do with little kids is like you draw a face. Okay, this is the happy face. So
That's right. And you can imagine what I went through when I tried to contact National Geographic, Smithsonian Institute. I had state archaeologists out there. They're
and
all taught that this doesn't exist.
but what? But okay, well, that's what science is about, discovery.
You would think, but there's very closed minds out there in the
I know
scientific
that.
community.
I know
Even though
that.
state archaeologist was great, I mean, but he was more interested in the supernatural activities on the property than the actual rock
But
carvings.
you know what? I think that's and I understand what you're saying, because I've heard sometimes that with academics in certain fields, big discoveries are only made when the old guys die out and the fresh blood comes in, because a lot of them are so set in what they learned maybe 20 or 30 years before as what
Oh,
the truth was, that when they're presented
Absolutely.
with new evidence, especially if it flies in the face of what they thought was the truth, they just
Right.
don't accept it. Like, it's not. That's not real. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the kind of discovery that any scientist would like give anything to be a part of.
You would think so,
Yeah.
but I've got nothing but resistance. But that's okay because I understand that resistance because it's hard to believe. All this is hard to comprehend,
Well,
um, but it's true.
you know what? The bulk of major scientific discoveries usually are resisted or take. It's like it's not everything that's discovered out there is just accepted right off the bat. I'm surprised that they're like, you always think of
That's
these.
that's the sole reason I wrote the book because
Okay.
it was very difficult to get people. No, actually, the state archaeologist is the one who told me about the number 7,
Okay.
and how in mythological terms it means a lot. And when I went to study it, I found out the number 7 was your believe it or not, it's your ancestors trying to get in touch with you.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and the number 3 is real important in this book, and the 3 has to do with that also. As the circle with the horizontal line
Hmm.
is all about the afterlife.
Wow.
It's incredible.
Yes. And let me ask you, when you went through, have you spoken to any other family members, or when you went through your ancestors'
Yes, I've
papers,
gotten.
did you ever come across anything?
As what? Like what?
Well, either that they made mention of something unusual, or sometimes families or certain things come up, and then nobody ever
N-
mentions it
no,
again.
never, none.
Okay.
And that also tells me that I was the sole target of this whole thing
Okay.
from childhood. And I think when I was in those caves in West Virginia was when I was marked.
Okay.
And it just so happens the time I was playing in those caves was the same time they were blowing dynamite the bedrock out to build that my house is built on. They put a basement in. They blew the bedrock out with dynamite.
Wow.
And I can't help to think that
Yes. Oh,
somehow is
yes,
connecting
yes,
me.
yes, yes, yes. Especially when you're talking elemental entities. Absolutely.
Yes.
Oh,
Now the weird part of it is after this book has been written, they're trying to put the Mountain Valley pipeline, natural gas pipeline, through that area,
oh,
which will destroy all this. And so now I'm thinking that this is another reason that it's place to save it from
yes.
that.
Most definitely. Absolutely. Oh my God, Dave, this is so fascinating.
And the symbol for the no mountain pipeline
Uh-huh.
is a circle with a horizontal line.
Oh my. So let
That's
me
the
ask you,
symbol you see
do
now
you
out
have
there.
any
That's
family
amazing.
that you've talked to about now, people that are alive now? Have you told them
Yes.
what you found, and what do they say?
Well, I told my mother. My mother's very religious, so I was very hesitant to tell her about this. But of course, it's so phenomenal. I did,
Okay.
and she had absolutely no support for this whatsoever. But when she read my book, it like everything changed.
Really?
Yeah, because the book explains it in detail what happened,
That's incredible.
and it gives you explanations and everything. It's just
Right, that in other words, it's not really if you look at it from that perspective, it doesn't fly in the face of any type of religious belief. On the contrary.
no, exactly. Now, of course, when you talk to somebody who's very highly religious, anytime you mention ghost, that's
Oh.
demons.
Okay, yes, you're right. I've heard of that. I've heard of that.
And that's what my mom first thought about. But these weren't demons. It's a very friendly, exciting afterlife out there. And I think that's one of the biggest things about the book. It really gives you a great argument in the existence of an afterlife and a very positive belief in the afterlife.
Well,
And
absolutely.
and I don't see how you can say that I wasn't contacted by my ancestral spirits and these Indian spirits and maybe this ancient civilization.
Right. Well, and this is the thing. If we go on that theory, we're talking about things that happening that predate, you know, Judeo-Christian beliefs, because that was
That's right. That's another thing too. I talk to people that are Christians, and I think there's a lot to it and everything. But that's the belief in a person that didn't exist 3,000 years
right.
ago.
Exactly.
What was the religion about before that? And I think when you look at these petroglyphs and you look at everything, you go back to the very beginning of religion, which was animism.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Which was the belief that everything had a spiritual essence to it.
Exactly.
And that explained, and that's where I got out of Cherokee folklore, which explains this whole situation to a T.
Yeah.
That explains the carvings, explains the nature spirits, the elementals, explains it all.
Yes. Boy, that and especially if there was this one concentrated place where that was more evident than in other places. Not that it didn't exist, but this was maybe
Yeah, I've heard the
concentrated.
expression the veil is very thin in
That's all you
Clover
have to
Hollow.
say. It's all very thin, and I had been thinking about that right in my mind.
And I have things on film flying around you can't identify, and the thing is, I've got all this documented, so it's not like a crazy theory.
Which is fantastic. Thank God for cameras, huh?
Exactly. And I've been in
Otherwise, you'd be
photography
like,
all my life. Yeah.
this is what I saw. This is what I saw, and it's like it'd be your word.
Exactly.
Oh my God. Dave, you know what? I could go on for hours and hours talking to you, but I can't do that. But
I understand
want
completely.
to thank you so much. I gotta go. When I finish up here, I'm gonna go to your website because I gotta go look at these pictures. I'm not
Yeah,
kidding you.
I took a lot of stuff off the website because there was just too much on there, and
You
it made
know
it really
what?
slow. So but look at Instagram.
Yes.
If you're part of Instagram, look up the
Yes.
Seibold Effect, all one word.
I will.
And I just started posting on there,
Okay.
which is getting a lot of
Yeah, because
interest.
I mean, I have to show I've spent it with my mouth open because what you're describing.
Well, I love talking about it because you see I have a passion about
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about it because
But I don't blame you
and that's the
either.
whole reason.
I'd be passionate
And that's the whole
about it
reason about
too.
the book. I want to get the story out.
Well, let me
And
tell you something. It's a story that deserves to be out. I'll tell you that much right now.
I appreciate it very much.
Because it's what you're describing there is something that's incredible. But it's how I want to say incredible, but very logical. As long
Right.
as you open your mind and take
That's
the
it
blinders
completely.
off.
That's it completely. Once you do that, it
Hmm.
all comes clear.
Yes,
And I have not exaggerated one little bit in the story. I've not. Everything's true. Everything's 100% true with no exaggeration.
I believe it. Thank you, Dave, so much for spending this time. It has been fantastic, and I hope you come back and tell us more of what's been happening on your property because this is incredible, especially with what you were talking about, that pipeline that might be going through there.
Right. I'd love to. I'd love to.
All right, thank you so much, and have a great day, okay?
Thanks, and I really enjoyed it.
No, my pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
To finish up here, I'm going to go look. I, I'm telling you, this has been something that to me is, some people could go out there and say, oh, that's far-fetched. And it's like, just because it's far-fetched doesn't mean it's not true. A lot of the most interesting, original discoveries that man has ever made, when they first come out, people, exactly, they do that because we have this built-in filter that wants to keep our world the way it is. We don't want our paradigm to go. So we kind of resist whenever we get any information or proof that this, like when the world wasn't flat, it was round. That kind of deal. Like we resist it. We as human beings, our nature is that we're resistant to change. Despite saying that we're really in for it, subconsciously we resist change, especially something on those levels where we're talking, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, a shift in how we perceive the physical world and the spiritual or other dimensions, how they mesh or how close they are, or how some places Like he said, the veil is thinner there. And that's what I meant when I said when you go to some of these places around the world, you don't have access to them because by the time you get there, as in modern times, you've got a church or a building or a temple or some huge monument that's sitting over it. Because long before then, you've had people, the people before recognized what was special about it and kept building something on it. So access to it, like what he has now, to be able to look at these petroglyphs is forget it's non-existent. And the thing about elemental spirits and something like the water, oh, wow. And I do believe it. I do believe things like that. Um, and I think that there are places where that is more apparent, like I said, where it's thinner, like usually there is some type of difference. But I've seen, when he was saying that comment about that they were using dynamite to build the basement, I've run across a lot of cases where people have had instances of negative attention from elementals because of wells being dug and things like that without basically saying, hey, it's going to be okay. It's almost, and I know a lot of people have a problem with that. They kind of feel stupid that you're saying to something you can't see and saying, hey, it's going to be okay. Thank you, or or I'm going to do it. Um, they, they kind of feel stupid, but I've seen plenty, as a matter of fact, of instances where people have had things happen on their land, and when you trace it back, it has to do with something done having to do with elemental spirits. And the elemental spirits are kind of weird, let me tell you. They're doing their own thing in a way. Their existence is like, all that stuff is so interesting, guys. And that is part of the paranormal, the supernatural. Um, and when he says that, that there's faces, that's wow. And I mean, we even have, you have people that have said, certain places they'll have the faces of the people that passed on coming out. Uh, Besides EVPs, people that use, uh, the screens on the TVs, and they've captured also the face of those that have passed on. I mean, there's a lot of theories floating around out there about that. But this, what he's describing, is way out there. We're talking here prehistory, petroglyphs, and possible ancient alien influence. It's like, holy crap. Okay, it's a lot. My head right now is at saturation point going. "Ugh." But anyway, guys, thank you so much for viewing this show and listening to it. If you're catching the podcast, again, I'm on YouTube, or you can catch the podcast version of the show on iTunes, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, a bunch of places. You can even go to my website and you can download the MP3 file if you would like to do that. Plus, I have also links to the actual YouTube show. And you can catch me when I go live on Twitter, via Periscope, and on Facebook. And of course, again, shout out to my true believers. Please send me your stories, Marlene at MiamiGhostChronicles.com, with your encounters, your experiences, or what you've heard second or third hand. I want to hear from you. And listen to all those guru stories you all got, because I know there's plenty of them there. God knows I run to people all the time and they start telling me these stories, and it's like, so I know there's plenty of them out there. And what I like is where people, I mean, it's not there, certain people in certain places have these stories about places or areas where they live at, that the only people that know that story are the people that live there. Like he told me that thing about Cactus Hill. I never heard of Cactus Hill. Never heard about it. About that they had a settlement from what? Never heard of it. But see, the people that live there in those areas, so that's why I'm reaching out, that people are going to come. And whoever hears the sound of my voice, even if you're not in the United States, you are going to contact me with some story. Okay? And again, I want to thank you so much for being part of my audience. And I hope you like the video, subscribe to my channel, whichever way you find it. And I look forward to bringing the next show to you. So take care, guys.